there, this is DM and you are listening to my notes. So today's notes are on the merchants of Lyons and how they built their own private banking system. So the Mercantile class, rather the business class, for all throughout the ages had this simple problem, okay, right? How to operate a monetary economy when the sovereign's interests diverge from their own. So the great merchant houses of Europe rediscovered a possibility of a hierarchical organization of credit. So a local tradesman promised to pay might not be worth much beyond his small circle of suppliers and clients, but the promise of one of the international merchant houses, with their much larger volume of trade, their great stocks of reserve, and their long histories of success, was a different matter, you see. If a great merchant substituted his word for that of the local tradesman, an IOU that might have been previously circulated at most within the local economy could be transformed into one that could circulate anywhere where the great merchant's prestige was acknowledged. So in this way, a pyramid of credit could be constructed with the obligations of the local tradesmen at the base, larger wholesalers in the middle, and the most exclusive, well-known, and tight-knit circle of international merchants at the top. The international merchant house could impose itself, in other words, between the local merchants and their ultimate counterparties, and in doing so, transform inert bilateral promises to pay into liquid liabilities that could easily be assigned from creditor to creditor and so circulate as money wherever the great house's credit was current. And essentially, this was your very first bank, right? It's the creation of this private payment system that the modern banking system originated on. If you think about it, a bank is in essence an institution that writes IOUs on one hand and then accumulates IOUs on the other hand. Almost all the assets of a bank are nothing but promises to pay, and almost all of its liabilities are likewise promises to pay. So these great middlemen had a purpose, okay? So let's just talk about that now. So the fundamental problem with the money of the sovereign is the fact that they misuse their money and they can always cry it up, cry it down, randomly create more, and then, mess around with your purchasing power. And if you were to accumulate wealth, it may disappear into thin air because they decided to randomly inflate it for their own means. Where this sort of pyramid of credit and this banking system developed by the great merchant houses of Europe really shined was exchange banking, okay? Okay, so Italian merchants wishing to import goods from a supplier in the Low Countries could purchase a credit note known as a bill of exchange from one of the great Florentine merchant houses. He can pay for this either in local sovereign money or on credit. Okay, so by doing this, he achieved two things. First, he accessed the miracle of banking. He transformed an IOU backed by only his own puny word for one issued by a much larger, more creditworthy house, which would be accepted across Europe. Alright, so he had transformed his private credit into money. His second achievement was to exchange a credit for a certain amount of Florentine money into one for a certain amount of the money of the Low Countries where he was making the purchase. So the bill of exchange was actually denominated into a private unit of account by the exchange bankers called the écu de marque. And by using this écu de marque, they could literally figure out what the value of the sovereign's money was, the market value of the sovereign's money. So think about it in terms of figuring out the forex market for any given currency pair. Of course, there was a risk to the bank, right? So the rates of the two sovereigns' monies against the imaginary écu de marque might change in between his issuing the bill of exchange and it being cashed in the Low Countries, but the bankers made sure that their fees and commission made that risk worth taking. And so this is how the bankers made their money. This is generally how they make their money today too. So the thing here to note, okay, is this was the first ever private monetary system that had the three fundamental properties of money. First, they had a unit of extract value, the écu de marque. Secondly, it had its own system of accounting, the rules of bookkeeping set out by Pacquiao's de arithmetica, and the standard protocols agreed between the great houses, the merchant houses of Europe. And it had a system of transfer and clearing credit balances using the Bill of Exchange and the great clearinghouse of the Central Fair. In essence, this system became a supranational private money interacting with domestic private money. And that's what the banking system was back in the day, right? It was a way for merchants to trade and engage in business without the risk of the sovereign's money going, to zero or whatever. So it was a useful thing back in the day. It was a useful solution. Of course, this entire solution got corrupted over time when the banking interest and the sovereign interest married. And one anointed the other with authority, and the other decided, you know what, since we're good at, risk management, we'll manage your cash flow. And so we will touch on that in the next podcast. I want to thank you all for listening and joining me. Like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you in the next one. Bye.